My name and your host for today is, as always, Jimmy Wirth, and this is Jimmy and Zoe's Traverse Talk Show. Today we will be discussing a number of literatures today of this year of 2014-2015. First off, we have The Things They Carried, written by Tim O'Brien. This novel is set in the era of the Vietnamese War and how a soldier like O'Brien dealt with it. Here to elaborate more is my partner, Zoe. How are you doing this fine morning, Zoe?
I'm great, Jimmy, and I have a few things to say about this novel. First off, I'd like to say that Martha was something. Talk about a crush.
Yes, I know what you mean.
I mean, throughout the book, we hear about them and they never actually intertwine. It's sad, Jimmy, and I think the audience felt that way. Lieutenant Cross must have been internally crushed.
Oh, I see what you did there. And, I mean, what can I say? This guy was in the military and she must know that they can never be together. Reasons for death or lack or seeing each other must be really hard.
I guess, but actually in the first part of the book, where Tim is with his platoon and as the audience we learn the names and stories of everybody. It leads up to the actual fear when we lose one of the characters, Lavender. Even though it's in chapter 1, the feeling we get from losing Cross lost one of his friends hurt.
I agree, Zoe, because I felt that O'Brien was in a very difficult time.
In The Man I Killed, Tim goes on and on about how he can't get over the fact that he killed the enemy with a grenade. He also gets his best friend inadvertently killed, Kiowa. This fictional character goes through hell and he doesn't even want to be there.
Seems like a concept that all these novels have shared the physical and emotional burden the main characters carry with all of them. Isn't that something you'd agree with?
Oh, definitely. And the things they carried, Cross definitely feels really responsible for his men, something that was extremely stressful for him, I'm sure. With all the pretty horses, John Grady Cole feels as though it's up to him to be the savior of his own story, more than likely because of the lack of guidance from his parents. The world always seems to meddle with his ambitions. In Invisible Man as well, the main character is constantly troubled by how society sees him, but it's almost as he's fighting more with himself.
That's something, Zoe. But I think we should ask the man himself. Here we have the one and only Tim O'Brien.
Hello, Tim. We were just discussing your book, The Things They Carried, and we wanted to ask you a couple questions to get the real answer.
Sure, Zoe. Ask away.
Alright, Tim, how did you feel when the character, Tim, had a full scholarship, but he decided to draft into the war because of peer pressure?
I'm not going to lie. He felt very insecure. All of his friends signed up, and he was the only one that hadn't. But they didn't have a scholarship like him either. I guess you could say that he bit the bullet. That he didn't gather a lot of memories from the war. Things aren't like anything. If he could change the past, he would indefinitely.
Wow, that's very inspirational. The second question I have for you is, do you feel that if he had stayed in college, would he have been happier?
In all honesty, I think he would have stayed. He witnessed his best friend die, and there was nothing he could do. He could have had a great job, and now all he has to show is the stories, and anxiety, and depression.
Well, that's something we would not expect from you today. I'm glad we had you on the show.
Glad I showed up. Thanks for having me. Wow, that was something I had not expected. That man is truly gifted. I'm glad we had him for today. Next up, we have First Blood, written by David Morrell. In this book, a man of the name Rambo is first seen walking down the streets, inspired by the town sheriff Teasel. Teasel and Rambo have many disputes with each other, and end up both killing each other in the end. One of the major concepts I want to go over in this book is prejudice. I think Teasel kept picking up Rambo because of what he looked like, and not by what he did.
I know what you mean, Jimmy. Teasel was always out to get Rambo, not even knowing who he was and what he's done, being a prisoner of war. In fact, I remember that they both served in the war, so they had this connection that could have bonded them, but instead put them to the test of surviving.
Well, if we want our questions answered, who better to ask than the man himself, David Morrell.
Hello, David.
How's it going, Zoe?
Great. David, we wanted to know what was going through your mind as you decided to make this book and how you employed the prejudices in it.
Well, you see, Rambo being a POW made him more scared to society than the average person. So when Teasel approached him, Rambo gave the essence of fear to Teasel, when in reality, Rambo, he was wanting help.
That's a very interesting point. Another Another question our viewers had was that you chose to emphasize his ignorance over the entire book when it could have been more focused on Ravo and his struggles.
Unfortunately, that's something the entire audience was expecting. But the audience needed their eyes opened to the other side of the story. Ignorance can affect someone hugely compared to what they really know.
Excellent point. Thank you very much for being here today to shed some light on the truth. We hope to have you back sometime.
Thanks for having me, Zoe. I'm glad we could have him on the show today, Zoe. The third novel I'd like to discuss with everybody is All the Pretty Horses, written by McCaffrey.
Oh great, this is actually one of the more complex stories as it covered many themes of adolescence and it was more of a coming of age story in a unique and twisted way.
The three musketeers, John, Blevins, and Rollins, seek out to find a solution to their problems that are answered with death, family, manhood, love, loyalty, and friendship.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about death as it's used in the story. Here today is Cormac McCarthy to tell us a little bit more. Here today is Cormac McCarthy to tell us a little bit more about it.
Hello, Zoe.
Hello, Mr. McCarthy. Thank you for your time. Something that intrigued me while reading All the Pretty Horses was the evolution of death in the story as it went full circle from the death of John Grady Cole's grandmother to the death of Blevins, which created a very muted beginning. Although the boys were not particularly fond of Blevins initially, he sort of began to grow on them, and his death hit them pretty hard.
Along with this death concept, friendship was the higher themes due to their use of each other to defend against the next posse. Where they lose a member, they learn from it and take on their revenge to his enemies.
That's interesting because I felt like they were much more close to the beginning of their journey than towards the end. It was almost like, to me at least, that these traumatic events kind of separated and set them apart. These young boys were put in a position that forced them to grow up very quickly, and it almost instituted an every man for himself sort of feel.
Everybody has to grow up sometimes, though. For these young boys, they are put to the test with obstacles of love, lust, and trust to get them where they want to go.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today, Jimmy?
Doing great, Ralph. Anything you would like to add to this?
Yes. Although written in the 60s, this novel still attacks racial prejudices around today. The fight against the truth behind the disability of African Americans is ongoing and extremely current. Effort was pushed back towards civil equality and movement. During the 60s and 70s, but not enough was really done. The feminist movements are still growing, and women continue to change their role in society.
That's unbelievable to hear from you, from a man like yourself. It's like you're a book in a closet that's a bestseller. I'm so glad that we could have you today, Ralph.
Glad I could be here.
This has been a good day for the show, Zoe. We have learned all of the conflicts from these authors and understood it from the books themselves.
I agree with you entirely. I'd love to keep going, but it looks like we're out of time. See you next episode, and thank you for joining us for Jimmy and Zoe's Traverse Talk Show.
And
Scene.